Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and it is the May meeting of the Parks Recreation Greenway Advisory Board. Thank you to everybody for being here. And as you know, Jennifer Wagner, our chair, is not here because she tested positive for COVID. So we are ready to go. And do we have any, I think the first item on our agenda is public comment. And do we have anybody here for public comment? All right, well then we go on to the next thing. Our next item is to have the report from the Raleigh Youth Council. So if you all want to come on up.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay,
Can you turn the mic down
Yeah.
closer? Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I'm Cordelia. Sorry, my voice is a little, it's been acting up. I'm here from the Raleigh Youth Council. We had our spring convention on April 23rd. We had over 100 teen youth council members and advisors from all around the state that attended, and Councilor Forte also stopped by. I think everyone there really enjoyed the chance to finally meet other council members in person after we had virtual conferences for so long. It was a really successful event. Out of all the people that I talked to while I was there, it seemed like everyone had fun with our activities. They enjoyed the lunch, they made friends, they enjoyed our gift bags. I even saw people wearing the pullovers that we gave them. They were all black pullovers, like long sleeve in sunny weather, but they liked them so much that they still wore them. So it was really exciting to get the chance to host the in-person final conference of the year, and RYC was even invited to host the team building conference next year, so we're looking forward to doing that. And then we recently had our final meeting, but before that we had our election meeting. We had several close runoffs for positions, which was very exciting to see that much interest in our RYC exec board. I ended up getting the new chair position. Again, I'm Cordelia McKelvey, so you'll be seeing more of me over the next year, and you'll also get to meet our new vice chair, Maribel Legbaga, and she'll be coming to these as well. And the new exec is excited to start planning new events over this coming year. We'll be able to have even more events than we did last year, or like this past year, so I'm looking forward to that. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much, and congratulations in your new position. We look forward to working with you. The next item on our agenda is tree preservation and planning, the new council ordinance.
Zach Manor is to the podium. He'll introduce. This is you've heard about the council's authorized potential text changes regarding tree conservation. And so Zach is bringing forward to present to you all some information with his colleagues from Planning and Development. There's going to be a lot of information to absorb, so what we're going to do here, this is a feedback opportunity for us. So if you have questions, and if you think of questions after the meeting, we're going to send them all to Giovanna. She'll collect all of them. She'll forward them then all to Zach and the Planning Development team for a response, and then we'll send them back to you. So don't feel rushed if you're missing something. We'll have that opportunity to do that within the next week for you to send your questions into Giovanna, and she'll collect them all. Zach?
All right. Well, as introduced, I'm Zach Manor, urban forester with Raleigh Parks. I'm here with Justin Rometta. He's the zoning administrator for our planning and development department. He oversees one of the groups deals with text changes and updates to the Unified Development Ordinance. So what we're going to talk to you a little bit about tonight is the TC 222. It's a tree preservation and planting text change. There was some desire from council to make some updates to our city's tree conservation requirements. We'll get into some details about what we're looking at, kind of where we've come from, where we are currently, and where we're heading. We're on a bit of a tour to talk about this. We've already spoken to the Environmental Advisory Board. We're coming to the Parks Board this evening. We'll be going to the Stormwater Advisory Commission, and then a pre-meeting, I believe, with the Planning Commission. So this is part of kind of getting the word out to you folks, as well as to our citizens, giving as many opportunities as we can for input. We're doing some exciting stuff, and we're early in the stages, and this is a great time for us to kind of reach out to you to get your thoughts, feelings, suggestions as we work through the process. So We can do questions as needed, and again, much like Scott says, if you have them after the fact or some people reach out to you with questions, send them out. We'll work on some responses, provide you some updates before your next meeting. You can review those, and we can go from there. All right. And so to get started, I'll bring Justin up, and he can get started.
Thank you, Zach. Good evening, board members. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. As Zach said, my name's Justin Rometta. I'm with the city's Planning and Development Department. And so part of the work that my team does is maintain the city's Unified Development Ordinance, and that's the document that contains the bulk of the city's development regulations. And so as Zach said, we're here to talk with you about some proposed changes to that ordinance and present it to you and hopefully get some good feedback. So thanks again for having me. I've got just a three-part kind of presentation for you this evening. I'm going to go through some of our existing regulatory and statutory framework in which we are allowed to regulate things like trees, and then talk about some preliminary ideas that we have for how to change the ordinance in order to achieve kind of council's stated goals and what they've kind of directed us to do to date, and then talk about some next steps. As Zach said, we're still pretty early on in the process, so there's not a whole lot of next steps. Right now we're going around and getting some preliminary early feedback from folks like you, and we're going to take that feedback and then start putting it into some draft regulations, which there'll be more opportunity for input on at that point as well. So just some background on our existing regulatory framework. Municipalities in North Carolina get all their power to regulate development from the state. And that's pretty consistent throughout municipalities, from Raleigh to Cary to Asheville to Charlotte, et cetera. And most of that's done through our zoning powers, and we regulate things like landscaping and certain tree plantings through our zoning powers. But the city is a little unique in that it does have some specific enabling legislation from the state that does allow us to do things a little bit differently than some other jurisdictions might be able to do. So this is a session law from 1985, and it allows the city to regulate the planting, maintenance, removal, replacement, grading, and preservation on public and private property for the list of trees that you see there below. Champion and co-champion trees, which we'll talk about a little bit more in detail here in a minute. Trees that are designated as historic property. Certain species that might be designated as endangered, threatened, or a special concern by the city council. And then certain species that are listed as protected by the Plant Conservation Board as well. In addition to that list of trees, we also have the ability to regulate tree and tree planting, removal activity, et cetera, in floodways, on steep slopes, in water supply watershed areas, and in areas which are called resource management zoning districts. And we'll talk a little bit more about those as well as we go through. There's also a law that was passed in 2001 that allows the city to regulate the removal and preservation of existing trees, basically along the perimeter of properties. So basically that law says that we can regulate within 65 feet of roadways and property boundaries where the adjacent property is developed, and up to 32 feet where the adjacent property is undeveloped. And also similar language about the preservation and removal of significant specimen or champion trees. And so this law is really the kind of backbone of our existing tree conservation ordinance today, is where we get the authority to have that ordinance, and it's what most of the regulations we have today are based on. So just a note about champion and co-champion trees. It's a term you hear a lot. Forgive me if this is stuff you all know. This is a presentation we're giving to as Zach said, several boards throughout the city. But the champion tree is a very specifically and narrowly defined term. It means a very specific thing. And it's typically understood to be the largest individual tree of a certain species within a specific geographic area. So the reason this is of note is that while we have the authority to regulate their removal, it doesn't necessarily do a whole lot to move the needle if you're talking about trying to preserve a large canopy throughout the city, because there are so few of them to begin with anyway. So moving on to the UDO today and how we regulate trees and landscaping in general, it's really in three main areas. So we talked a little bit about the tree conservation rules so far. They're there to really preserve existing healthy trees. We also have forestation requirements, and those apply in the water supply watersheds. And then we also have transition and protective yards, which are really kind of landscape buffer yards around perimeters of property. And I'll go into just a little bit of detail on all three of these here. So the tree conservation rules, as they are today, apply to developments on sites that are 2 acres or larger. And what those rules say is you have to preserve trees on site. Generally, it's going to be 10% of the lot area that's being developed. It does go up to 15% in some of our lower density residential districts. Our R1 and R2 districts bumps that number up to 15%. Tree conservation rules, there's a very specific hierarchy and a very kind of complex and specific set of rules. So I'm glad to have Zach and his team here to help explain if there are any technical questions on how those work today. And those regulations are really, as I said, kind of crafted to save existing stands of healthy trees. There is no allowance, no requirement to plant trees with tree conservation rules. And again, there are some very specific regulations about what can be preserved, where it can be preserved, etc. Here's just an example of what a portion of a tree conservation plan might look like that comes into the city as part of a development. And then in the bottom left there's an image of some tree protection fence that y'all may have seen around the city. And typically what that means is that's an area that's been designated as tree conservation, and it's the developer's required to fence it off so it doesn't get damaged as part of the development process. The forestation requirements are a little different. Again, they apply in our 3 water supply watershed areas. They require that 40% of the lot area be forested, and so that can be either through planting or preservation of existing trees. Of course, if trees are planted, we have standards for species and size, etc. So here's just a map of the water supply watersheds that we have in the city's jurisdiction. So you've got a key map in the top left, and then going clockwise, the Richland Creek urban watershed in blue there in the top right, the Swift Creek watershed in green in the southern portion of the city, and then finally in orange you have the portion of Falls Lake watershed that's in the city's jurisdiction as well. So these are the areas where those forestation requirements apply. Finally, the transition and protective yards. So these are really about landscaping buffers between uses that may not be compatible next to each other. So for example, as you see here, perhaps between a shopping center and a residential use on the other side, there are requirements for what we call protective yards. These, just like forestation, can be combinations of preserving existing trees or planting. And we have the same standards for size and species if you're planting as well. So those are really the 3 areas where the bulk of our tree and landscaping regulations come from. This slide is just a list of a few other areas throughout the code where we do have some other scattered kind of requirements for planting. So for example, parking lots have to have a certain amount of trees based on the number of spaces in the lot. And then we require trees to be planted in the right-of-way next to the sidewalk as part of development as well. So that kind of leads us into why we're here today and why we're proposing potentially some changes to these existing rules. And so you know, as you all know, there's been a lot of development throughout the city, and that's led to a loss of a large portion of our tree canopy. A concern that we often hear from folks is the loss of trees in kind of an infill or redevelopment site. So it's a small lot that might have some very old, beautiful oak trees on it, but it's a tight site and it's not large enough to kind of trigger the tree conservation rules. So there's no requirement to necessarily save those trees, nor is there any requirement to replant if those trees are actually removed. And so that's a pretty common complaint, and one of the items we're trying to address with some of these changes here. And so we took a version of we took a version of this presentation and some staff ideas to City Council, and they ultimately said to kind of go forth and do a few things. One, excuse me. One was to look at reducing that tree conservation threshold from 2 acres down to 1. They also authorized us to look into using, thank you, that authority we have to regulate significant specimen trees. It's not something we do yet today, but as you saw earlier, we do have the authority to do it. And then looking at some planting requirements for smaller lots as well. Those that would fall under where that tree conservation threshold would apply. The resource management zoning district is an area they said we're kind of going to set aside, and we may use it as a tool in the future. But for the immediate task in front of us is to adopt some text amendments to the UDO. The Resource Management Zoning District is a tool that would allow some more flexibility in what and how we can regulate, but it is a much more substantial process in that it would require kind of a large-scale rezoning throughout the city. So we've got some ongoing initiatives that are going to provide some more data and feedback as to where those areas might apply in the future. But it is not part of the immediate changes that we're discussing today. So that first item, reducing the tree conservation to lots between 1 and 2 acres, it's a pretty simple and easy to understand change, right? We would bump that threshold of if you're a site larger than 2 acres developing today, bump that down to 1 and apply essentially the same set of rules, maybe with some minor tweaks. And so that would be the idea with lowering that threshold. And as you can see here, it does have some potential for some pretty significant benefit, right? If we just looking at some raw data here, they're requiring a 10% average tree conservation, looking at lots throughout the city that are between 1 and 2 acres now, what could add potentially up to nearly 600 acres of additional trees throughout the city. So we see some big benefit with this change potentially.
Could you say that again, please?
We will share this presentation with you after the meeting, so and don't wear yourself out taking notes. So you'll have it, which gives you a chance also to think back about questions you may have. So we'll send it out as a PDF form after the meeting.
Yeah, big takeaway from this screen, if there's that number in the bottom right, is you see if we took the existing rules and apply them, there's a potential for another 593 acres of tree conservation throughout the city. Mm-hmm. So moving on to the significant specimen tree preservation, and this is another area where we can see some pretty large impact in addressing that concern I mentioned earlier about kind of redevelopment and infill sites. So as mentioned, we do have some ability to regulate some specific list of tree species and sizes that are deemed quote unquote significant by the city council. And in those cases, we could require those trees to be preserved. We understand that in not all cases those trees are going to be able to be preserved, but we could require a permit for their removal and then provide some flexible options for someone to replant back in the case that the tree just could not be preserved for whatever reason. And of course, we could allow those to count towards the tree conservation area requirements as well. The resource management zoning districts, again, I talked about that briefly before. It's a tool that would give us some broader authority to regulate. But we do have some ongoing initiatives that we feel like could help inform where, in which areas of the city we might want to apply this. Again, that would require kind of a large-scale rezoning of many properties throughout the city. So it is potentially a long process, but it is something that is an option in the future. So the Urban Heat Island Mapping Project is one of those initiatives that has just wrapped up. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with this, but this is one of the items that could help inform us where to apply those resource management zoning districts in the future. So again, as we stated earlier, we're kind of in the very preliminary stages. We're going to several other boards and commissions throughout the city. We're really hoping to get some good feedback on what I've shared with you today. I know it's a lot, so feel free to digest it and think about it and come back with feedback and questions. But that feedback we gather from these boards and commissions will be taken by staff, and then staff will go ahead and draft some regulations, and then those will be put out for public consumption as well. The kind of 15-second life of a text change is kind of that staff drafts something, we put it out for public review and comment. It goes ultimately to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission typically refers it to one of their committees to kind of flesh out all the nitty-gritty details. Ultimately, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, who holds a public hearing again to decide whether to adopt it. And so there's a lot of touch points that will happen along the way and opportunities for feedback, but we're hoping that talking to folks like you early on will help get us started in the right direction. So with that, I'll stop talking. Thank you again for listening, and look forward to the feedback that you might have.
And I'll just follow up again. So we'll send out this presentation as a PDF because there is a lot of information on it. Second thing we'll send out is, and it's on this last bullet here I want to highlight, there's a planning and development has a very nice text change engagement portal on where you can keep track of what's going on with this text change. So it's a very well done opportunity for you to keep and share it with folks that you think might be interested. So it's a great way that they make available the opportunity to see what's going on with that piece. And we'll put that link when we send it back out to you.
Questions that board members have?
Yeah, so does the existing ordinance have any regulations in terms of what the penalties are for not following the regulations that have been put together, and what is the oversight process for ensuring that these ordinances are being followed, or there's a penalty process for not following it?
Yeah, so in an initial phase, we require some pretty detailed drawings before we issue you a permit to develop, right? So you've got to show Zach and his team that you comply with this ordinance before you do anything, before you start any type of work on your site. And then there are ongoing inspections and those sorts of things throughout the process as well. If down the road, your project's built and then there's some, you maybe go down and cut some trees down that you weren't supposed to or that were supposed to be tree conservation, then the ordinance does have some kind of specified remedies for that, including zoning violations, civil penalties, those sorts of things.
Okay. And is...
Excuse me, Melissa,
Yep.
make sure you use, everyone make sure you use your mics, please.
Just pull it closer to.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you talk about the replanting process, when the tree cannot be preserved, is it proportional? Is it 1-to-1 or is it 1-to-many? How does that process work?
It doesn't work at all yet. So that's one of the areas we'd like, maybe if you have feedback or ideas on that, that we haven't got to that level of detail at this point.
Even for sites over 2 acres? I think he's asking to understand how it works now.
Well, so the existing tree conservation rules there are no planting requirements. So remember, they are just about saving existing trees. So there is no opportunity to remove those trees. There is no planting requirement that can help you satisfy that. It is really about, do you have existing healthy trees on site? And if so, how many of them do you need to save?
Thank you.
Marcia?
How does the ordinance work for trees that are close to the property line of a developed parcel where the roots are being harmed for that parcel to be developed? There's a house that's being built on Brooks Avenue that just about fills up the lot entirely. Big oak trees are close to the property line on the properties on either side, and those trees have enough disturbance that I don't see how they can live.
I'm going to see if Zach maybe wants to talk about root zone and those sorts of things.
Oops, sorry. So currently, under the current ordinance, it disqualifies a tree from being tree conservation. So the way we're set up is we work on a critical root zone. So the way to think about that is it's 1.25 feet for every inch of diameter of the tree. So a 10-inch tree would have a 12.5-foot radius in a circle. I know I'm getting a little mathy on you, but what we look at is that critical root zone is what we consider helps support and feed the tree and keep it alive and flourishing. If you disturb more than 30% of that, especially in a larger tree, it's very difficult for the tree to be able to recover that. So in situations that you're talking about, in a lot of cases, there really isn't, even in existing conditions, 30% or 70% that's undisturbed. So kind of that is the key. What we don't want to do is get in a situation where you leave a really large tree just to leave it, but you've basically created a hazard by cutting the roots. So I think the planting option in some situations, again, tree may be in poor health. It may already have existing conditions that make it something that we're better off in the long run to remove. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but.
Well, yeah,
Other questions? Kara?
Yeah, you mentioned before that this could create an additional almost 600 acres that's, falls under this, but there was another 100,000 acres that didn't necessarily fall under this. So I was wondering what that could be and what it would take to bring some more of that over to the protected side.
So are you talking a little more about going smaller than 1 acre?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's some of the feedback we're looking at. I think it kind of points to that same issue we talked about before. The smaller your lot is, the more critical root zone gets disturbed during development. So as you get smaller, thinking about a really large tree, it would encompass most small lots, making those lots undevelopable, right? So in a scenario where you may have a house now, more than that 30% would already be disturbed theoretically. So that's the concern about getting smaller. The smaller you get, the less likely those trees would qualify as tree conservation based on just the size of the lot and the percentage of the lot of which they take up.
But to follow up with a question and tie what the two of them have said, if the tree is on an existing lot that isn't being disturbed, but part of its root zone is in the disturbed lot, then I see that as a gap not addressed. But in the instance that Marcia brought up, it wouldn't come up anyway because I'm sure a lot on Brooks Avenue is not 1 acre. So it wouldn't, it would be a moot question, but so it's complicated. And I assume that the critical root zone issue is, certainly one of the most glaring tree removals in my time in Raleigh has been at Country Club Homes and at Fairview and Oberlin, where lots of very large trees were decimated, and I assume it's the critical root zone that permitted that.
Yes, that's
decimation.
correct. I think one of the hopes of having the significant tree ordinance, because it is very difficult for a tree to qualify as tree conservation, having this kind of alternate requirement that may preserve some of those trees that you wouldn't necessarily have to disturb them, but some existing pavement or a water line or something wouldn't necessarily disqualify a significant tree like it would disqualify it from being considered a tree conservation tree, if that makes sense. So tree conservation is very restrictive after it exists, right? So it doesn't allow disturbance of land, disturbance of trees. It works pretty well on a large commercial lot, but if your backyard has tree conservation in it, that means technically birdhouses are illegal. You can't put a doghouse in there. There are a lot of restrictive things that, and that's kind of the extreme, but the goal there is preservation in the long term, so we don't allow disturbance. It also makes it pretty difficult if that's your house, and even though your asset is helping, right, it makes it difficult for your use of your own property in some cases. So by the strict nature of tree conservation, kind of having something that exists outside of that gives us more flexibility to preserve some of those larger trees that wouldn't happen under the current requirements, if that makes sense.
Other questions? Yeah, Molly.
Sorry, I have one more follow-up question. When you look at the lot sizes, do you look at the lot sizes? So if there's a large residential community that's getting developed, do you look at tree conservation for each of those lots, or do you look at it as the overall acreage of the development that's happening?
We look at the overall acreage of the development.
So you expect at least 10% to be preserved based on, like if this is a 30-acre development, then you want to have at least 3 acres of it preserved.
That's correct. And so there are, we didn't really get into the specifics, but there's a couple tiers of tree conservation. So when you go to develop a site, you have to work your way through the tiers. So primary tree conservation is the most important, and we require that right off the bat. So that's things like Neuse River buffers, areas along thoroughfares, champion trees that were listed previously, a few of those others. So those are the first things you have to protect. And then if you haven't reached your 10%, then you have some more flexibility somewhere else on your site to meet that remaining portion. Typically it occurs in that outside buffer around the edges. So if you have 8% of the primary, you're still responsible for 2. And so the property owner has some flexibility as long as it meets certain size and density requirements to locate that somewhere else on the property.
And is the 10% in line with what maybe some of the other city averages are, or what's the kind of ratio? Let's say Atlanta versus Austin versus Raleigh. Has that been looked at?
Yes, it is fairly unique in how it's described. A lot of it is based on kind of the specifics of the enabling legislation. There aren't really any other communities in North Carolina that have an apples to apples comparison. Looking at some other cities, there are a lot of sort of looking at Durham, Charlotte, places like that. They have more of sort of a canopy coverage model and allow significant replacement in some cases. So there really isn't a direct comparison on a percentage scale. A lot of those are based sort of on use. So you may be required to have a certain lot coverage based on whether you're residential versus industrial or commercial.
And what's the counter feedback that you have received? I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, decrease the lot sizes, increase the percentage, but have you received any feedback from the development teams to say we need to do less conservation? Is there any feedback on that?
There has been some feedback. We've given I believe a similar presentation to this one. A lot of it's about flexibility and the ability to replant, things along those lines. I can't speak to the full. They haven't provided us all of their questions yet either, so they kind of got the initial thing. So it's a bit of both. I think they also understand that preserving big trees is important when possible, but having flexibility makes it much easier for them, and by making the ordinance a little easier to manage and deal with and go through would also have some benefits on that end.
Thank you.
Marcia?
I have good news that might be of use. Tim Beatley from the Biophilic Cities Network said one of the advantages that biophilic cities have is that they can use other cities as resources for getting ideas about how various cities have created their tree conservation standards. And just want to say that take advantage. He would love to connect us with other cities that are concerned. You know, I had to speak to him about it, so that's how I'm telling you.
Oh, absolutely.
Other questions? I have one other comment related to Kara's on shrinking the size, and it's not about conservation, but sort of the alternative that you've identified, and that is requiring planting. And right now, we don't require on small lots any trees to be planted. Isn't that, I mean, little trees will become big trees. Isn't that one of the easiest first steps that we should be doing as a city if we want to increase our tree canopy? Because it can be done on small lots as well as large lots.
Absolutely. Again, it kind of comes back to that enabling legislation and how it's determined if we have the right to plant versus not plant. So that's one of the things we're working out on. Part of this process is what the city is able to do under that enabling legislation. So yes, I would agree planting is pretty beneficial. If it becomes a requirement, that's great. If not, then that's something we need to focus on as a city to try to encourage that on the private properties as opposed to a requirement. So it is something we're looking at. It will sort of depend on basically the outcome of how that enabling legislation is applied.
Okay.
I don't want to be answering for Justin either, so if he's back there making faces because I'm making stuff up, you can hold it against me, not him. All right?
Lindsay, did you have a question?
So my question is kind of like, I get lost when there's like a lot of numbers and things, and I need to take notes because I'm a visual person. I need to see like what are we looking at now versus where are we going, and so forgive me because I have been listening, but could you please try to help me understand this? What is this circumstance now? Like I have all your definitions and your acronyms and forestation and conservation, TCA, all that stuff, the UDOs. What is the scenario now versus what you're saying we're looking at? I got the 593 acres number and the no current planting, but what is the difference in this scenario of what is in place now versus either what you're recommending or saying where we're going? I'm not quite getting that part.
Well, I'll take a shot. So the one is the planting as an option, having a planting requirement. The second is preservation of larger or significant trees, if that's the determination. So depending on the size or species, there are lots of different kind of qualifiers for what's considered a significant tree. That would be part of that definition is probably what we will be working on as part of this text change. So those are kind of the two big differences where tree conservation sort of favors groups of trees and wooded areas. This provides sort of an option for the larger individual trees.
So you're asking for preservation of larger trees. You're exploring reducing the lot size to expand the opportunity of conservation. Okay.
Yes.
That's essentially what you're saying. Okay, that's helpful and that's positive. I like positive things and I like trees, so that's good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you all so much.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. It was kind of piggybacking on what Beverly said, but I know there's no tree planting requirement right now. Do we have a tree planting assistance program where people can reach out to the city and just ask for saplings or seeds so that we're not necessarily forcing a requirement first?
Not currently. We do that in the right-of-way. So we do volunteer plantings outside of our required development-related trees, but that's pretty specific to city property at this point. So right-of-ways, FEMA lots, parks, things along those lines.
Sorry, just one
No,
last
no,
thing.
no, that's
I'm sorry.
fine. I think that we learn from each other's questions, and obviously there'll be other ones that are.
When you talk about planting as an option to conservation, have you guys considered buying credits as an option to conservation as well? So instead of a developer saying that, hey, look, I can't conserve this, I can't really replant this, but I will buy some sort of a credit which allows the city or other organizations to plant that tree somewhere else using that funding. Has that been considered as part of this?
Sort of a fee in lieu question. So there are some current fees in lieu in place in those cases. I think there are some questions about the validity of fees in lieu in general. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, as Zach said, I think we have some limited ability in our ordinance today to do what you're describing, to take a payment in lieu of planting a tree or tree conservation. I think there's questions about our authority to continue to do that. But I think what you're describing might be a little different in terms of, offering credits as an option. It's something that is a good idea, I think, and it's something that, as with all of this other stuff, as we said, it's kind of very fluid at the moment. But anything we do obviously have to be thoroughly vetted by our city attorney's office and that sort of thing. So if that's feedback you want to provide, we're happy to take it and see if that is actually an option or not.
Yep, okay.
Any other questions? And thank you all so much. And,
Thank you.
Having been involved with some changes, one of the things that I think as they do changes to the UDO that they often do, and I assume you will do in this situation, is give you some hypotheticals and mapping it out. And I think it goes directly to what Lindsay was asking about. This under the current law, you would have to do trees here, here, and here, and under this. And those kinds of hypotheticals, I think, help to work through the translation. And so thank you.
So, thank you, gentlemen. This is where, if we could have your thoughts and questions, because what you've also presented are some ideas, right? And that's what they're seeking, is that input, because they've not yet drafted anything. This is that opportunity, whether it's a credit opportunity, whether it's a tree planting program. This is what, if you can send to Giovanna by the 26th, next week, that way we can give it to them in time for that team to turn it around and give a response back for us. I think as this moves forward, this is an iterative process. As more ideas come forward, as they talk to other people, I think we'll get to that point when they get to it's a little more firmer on paper about what is current and what is proposed. The visuals, I think, will make it easier. But they're really collecting these ideas early, which is, thank you all for doing that. Again, if you can email your questions or thoughts or ideas to Giovanna, we'll share it with these gentlemen. They'll go through their process. And we'll also provide a copy of the presentation and the link. I think it's really important. And again, I want to highlight Planning and Development has done a nice job. How you can share keeping track of what's going on through the city's portal for engagement. I think it's a really good way to keep up with proposals and ideas as they're moving this forward.
I just asked you a quick question. Is this TC 222 currently on that portal?
So it's not on the portal. What will go on the portal is the actual draft regulations once they're written. We do have a web page on the city's website for this text change. I think if you just if you search that number on the city's website, it'll pull up that web page, and that'll have links to the portal for when it's useful in the future, and other web pages we maintain as far as keeping track of where things are in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Zach, and we appreciate your presentation. The next item on our agenda is the our own work plan. And so I think you all got a copy of that, and we can talk through what, if I can find it on my stuff. Yeah. Here it is. Yeah. Gee, I didn't really talk with Jennifer about how to conduct this conversation. So I'll give you a few comments. For one, let's just start at the top, and if there are any, I mean, you've all had this, and Jennifer drafted it after she and I spoke, and I had a couple of thoughts. I won't even worry about the edits, but one important thing is you go cultural goals. I think let's start there. Is there anything there that anybody thinks needs to be changed or altered or?
Please forgive me.
This is a reminder. This is not an action item for tonight. You won't take action until next meeting.
Okay.
So this is the opportunity to discuss.
Get
and
it worked
review.
out.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was thinking it was an action item. I thought, oh, gosh.
Do you all happen to have a hard copy? My printer died, and my tablet died.
Yeah, I can go through if anybody else needs it. What?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Okay.
suggest, but if you wanted to go in order, I can wait. I was gonna just jump in on the fourth bullet point under cultural goals, or actually, I think it's the third bullet on the third sub-bullet, financial assistance.
I have some comments there too. You go first.
Terrific.
Because I
no-
don't think it was clear.
Yeah, and I think last month we all really enjoyed the presentation on the fee increases, and we understand that those fee increases are important and they're necessary to meet the goal that City Council has professed to be able to shave some budget and make up for it in this area. But I think most of us had the concern that when you increase fees, it's kind of a, I don't know how to describe it besides saying that if it's a flat fee increase, it's impacting people that can afford it the least, the most. And so I'm wondering if there's maybe, we may already have this, but creating a foundation of some sort where we can have folks take donations and we can do fundraisers that puts money into a budget, and then do a means test where people can apply for free access so that it basically gives them free memberships. And I know you guys had spoken about having programs like this already to some degree, but maybe just increasing it for.
We will always be happy to increase. We have a very good partner with the City of Oaks Foundation.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to bring Mr. Haggerty with the City of Oaks Foundation to the board and just kind of, he can highlight some of the work that he does.
Okay.
But there's always opportunity, definitely, to increase that. Some of you all have seen Debbie Houston's presentation, but not all the board has seen that. So we can provide a report on kind of our annual update of where we are with there. But that is, increasing is always something that we would be supportive of.
Well, and to follow up, because my change was to clarify that as well, to say that it's opportunities for community support of participants and programs. Those were the words I added because we want to, we need financial assistance, not just opportunities for the community, but to support specific people being active. And newer board members, we have a very low cost but highly effective staff member who, and all of the proceeds from drink machines and donations can go there as well, and there have been some generous ones, to the Play It Forward, and you'll see that on the city's on the Parks and Rec website, and that's where they make sure, we kind of using a means test, that no participant is denied the opportunity to, that they are aware of. Now, some people might self and not know of, but it is. I think knowing more about that is not only for us to know more about it, but also for the community to know that we are trying to reduce barriers. And maybe that's some of the language that we need in there, is reducing barriers, so.
I have two questions.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for bearing with me with my voice. So, one question I have is, where does it fit in to add addressing employee pay? Like, that is something I'd like to see. Like, I know we're about to see an incremental increase, going to, like, I think the last number, $13 an hour or something, but like, where does that fit in here? Because I'd really like to see, and now I don't know if you all have seen it, but there's these threads all over Nextdoor where people are assessing the value of city jobs, including like fire department, which is not our purview, but lifeguards and teen jobs and value of them, and living wages and how we should be valuing people's work. And it's blowing up in my feeds. And so I'm seeing that that is something that people are concerned about. They share the same concern that I do. They have interesting ways of expressing it, maybe different than mine, but where does advocating for increasing a city minimum wage for Parks Department employees fit in here?
So that fits under the general fund of the city's operating budget, since we're classified as a city employee, except that would be the piece, and then that's work that you all can do as individuals always for that. We can bring back what that status is. I mean, there's our HR, we can invite our HR team to come in and talk about where that fits in the city's classification model, because they're the ones that manage our classification and compensation system, and it's actually on a review cycle. So positions are reviewed, random positions of all the city are reviewed on a annual basis, so that there is a whole structure for compensation and classification that's managed through HR. We could invite them in for presentation if you would find that helpful.
Well,
The part-time one we have a little more vested in, because largely we're not the only part-time employer in the city, but we are probably the largest.
biggest.
So we do a lot of work with budget and HR on developing, we're hoping things go well with council adoption, a new part-time compensation and classification that has this factor it's never had before, and that's that continuous review. That will be new for us. We've not had that. So very similar to how the full-time is managed, where positions are reviewed on an annual basis. This would have the same thing.
How do we support the Parks Department employees, like ensuring that you are, all of you, from temporary, part-time, full-time, rock stars, everybody continues to be paid well? That's something that I care about. So where does that fit in? Where do I put this on here that is something that I want to see as a priority, including I even heard about candidates running for office and they're advocating for a minimum wage in the $20 an hour range. And I'm not putting any number on the table, but the cost of living is really difficult, as we all know. So where do I do that?
I'm not sure that falls within our boundaries of work that we can do as the board, other than what you can do as individuals during the general fund, the budget process, since that's a public process. I don't know if that falls within our boundary, advocating specifically for just parks employees.
Well, I actually think, since this document goes and is reviewed by city council, and I thank you, Lindsay, for bringing it up, because I think I think showing that it's on our radar, that it's something we're concerned about, even if it's not a direct action item, it shows that something, and so maybe instead of using the term cultural goals, because that's a little, maybe we just say overall goals, because these are big picture items that we're looking at, and maybe we use some kind of language like support efforts to retain and recruit top employees. I mean, but I think even if we can't as a board say change the salary structure, it shows that as a board we think that is an important thing for when the council reviews
Yeah, because that does help with retaining and recruiting talent, skilled workers, and lifeguards are very skilled workers, and I hope that if I or my child or anyone, any human being were to ever need one, that they were there. And I know that that's something that I'm seeing a lot of concern about on the internet. I work in marketing communications, so unfortunately that means I have to spend a lot of time living on the internet. And people in our city are very concerned about even the pay of their lifeguards and not having all of their pools and community centers and amenities. They want them all back full. And so I'm seeing that that's not just a thing that Lindsay cares about. And so I want to support that everybody who works for the city and in our community, everything.
Is there general consensus for something along the lines of what I suggested there?
Okay, thank you. And thanks for humoring me exploring that, Scott.
No, I think it's a really important topic, and we can fine-tune the language on that. But I think setting that forth as one of our overall goals is...
Okay, thank you. My other question, that was question one. So the other question is, would it be possible, especially since there's many many new faces here, that could we possibly go around the table and say if there's any priorities that like each of us have? Like I've just shared like something that's really important to me at this point, and some of you who are new didn't know how in 2020 and 2021 what was really important to me was getting air conditioning in community centers. But I'm curious if we could possibly go around the table and share what are some of our individual priorities and how we can support each other. Is that something that is possible?
As acting chair, I'm okay with that, although in the sense that springing things on, I mean, I don't feel like it's not an attack springing, but people might not be prepared. So I think it'll come up in the overall. I want to go through this kind of category by category and let people bring up their issues then.
Cool.
And,
Thank you.
I definitely don't want to shut down the conversation. I just want, to go smoothly.
Yeah, I would second what you said, that I think we need to reconsider that first section as not just cultural goals, but overall goals, because our scope should be greater than just this, and I would argue that this is not enough.
And so in that framework, so we'll add supporting efforts to retain and recruit high-quality employees. Are there other topics that somebody would like to suggest there?
I just had a question about the first bullet. How are we measuring the progress towards these goals? Do we have a way to do that?
So we can report where we are with that status. You know, we made one of our first big steps is we have an equity and strategic initiative manager. So, and that role is working through developing our equity framework for our department. So we can bring back, we've done a presentation before, we can show where we are and then what status and steps we're taking towards getting to those goals.
Great.
Yeah. And we're, this is a large step forward for the city overall. So, and the department's playing a large part of that. We have members of our staff that are the city's guidance team. So it's kind of in alignment with what the city's doing, but we can show where we are on that.
That'd be great.
Other suggestions, comments?
Sorry guys. Just a quick comment under the overall goals. Something that I've been thinking of, in addition to all these fantastic ideas, are what is my job? I know we just brought that up. You know, we talked about what is our purview, what is not our purview. I think I am unclear as to what our purview is. So when we do this, I'm like, oh wait, that sounds like it should be our purview, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what our job is other than coming here and discussing. So I would love clarification on that as an overall goal. In addition to that, learning about, I came on this board and I didn't know anything about parks. You know, I really came from nothing and I've learned so much, but I want to learn more about the system that we are promoting, that we are the board for. I loved learning about the community centers and going to Pullen Park and realizing that there was a zoo there. I'm not from Raleigh, so those are things that I didn't know. And I think as a board member, when I go out in the community, I want to be that resource that knows all of that stuff. So in addition to all of the great work we do, where is that? I know we were supposed to do an equity class as well that we, I joined 2 years ago and we haven't talked about that. So there are things that I want ongoing education in addition to the advocacy work that we want to do. I don't see those initiatives happening, and I would love to see that put into our overall goals.
We can speak to the training, because that has been on this list. We had a change, COVID occurred, impacted some of that. And we had a change in the administration, so our Office of Equity and Inclusion, and who got the program started, left and took another position. The city's hired another person, and it's actually elevated to a department. And we have a meeting with Dr. Hamilton and the chair and vice chair coming up next month, trying to see about the retreat. Can we finally make that training at our upcoming retreat that we're talking about moving to September? So we are still following up. We just lost some momentum when we lost Dr. Caesar, and then COVID set us back a little bit. That's still one of those items that we intend to bring forward as that continuous learning process about the city and this goal of equity.
Oh, for sure. For
I guess
sure.
the
I
one
just wanted
piece
to be
is
able to
to-
see it there, you
Yeah.
know, that's something
Well, I
that's
think
on.
one, I like to be real concrete, and I
please.
think the change there that they're talking about is monitor department and PRGAB. I mean, I think it's not, we want to know what the department's doing, but you all are out there doing it, but we can monitor ourselves. And so I think adding that would be, as an insert on that goal, would
Awesome.
address part of that.
Great, thank you.
Also, it would be helpful if you made a copy of it, it would check the mission ordinance. It tells us basically what our responsibilities are. We do much more than that. But basically, this is the legal piece that tells us what our responsibilities are.
Great. I didn't know that, so thank you so much for sharing that.
And I do think it is important that, that it is, we are advisory. We do not, we are not, we're not the elected officials, and we serve in an advisory and raise issues and help elevate and raise awareness in our community. But we can't individually and collectively solve them all, as much as I'd like to.
Questions about what their role is, look back in your handbooks that you all received during orientation. All of that information is under boards and commissions in your handbooks. So if you need a refresher, please look at that information. All of that information is there about what the role of a board member is and what the board member of a chair and vice chair member is. So if you have any questions, please contact me and I'll point you in the direction of where that information is.
Great. Thank you, Giovanni. So other additions to this overall goals? Chris?
Well, it's more a suggestion on the bullet, the fifth, I can't count today. The fourth bullet under cultural goals, explore sources of supplemental funding for parks and greenways. And I know there's something actually in the handbook that Giovanna just mentioned, but it's about in-kind and monetary gifts that people want to give as part of the naming convention. But I guess my suggestion would be that we be more proactive in reaching out and maybe defining and getting almost like a rolling process so that we get a lot more corporations involved and they name segments of greenways and parks. And it doesn't have to be the permanent naming, which I think would probably fall outside of what the guideline in here says, but it would say like Pullen Park presented to you by WakeMed or something like that.
Something sponsored.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah, sponsored by them,
just-
exactly.
Yes, I've been thinking about that too. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and we could get, a website so that they don't just have their name on the park, they also have it on the website, but then it rolls, and that way we're able to kind of, at our monthly meeting, say, hey, we've got 10 naming rights that are expiring this month. These are the people that are bidding for it.
And
we
there
can-
are, when you go to naming rights, there are a lot of issues associated, Do you want Budweiser on your ball field? And those kinds of things. So it's a very complex issue. But it's where we're, it's definitely worthy of consideration in the financial scenario.
We're being encouraged to evaluate, and we should be, to evaluate more and more partnerships, or sometimes you'll hear the term P3, public-private partnerships, or public-public partnerships. So that's definitely something that we're being encouraged. And Stephen will make a presentation here briefly. You'll see more information on that as well.
So there are some opportunities that have been identified for sponsorship that you guys would like our help with?
So what we would probably enjoy is, appreciate those that you may be able to connect us with.
Okay.
Because to that point, are those few things, there's a naming process that we have, but if you know who might be interested in doing that, that would be wonderful to connect us with, and then we would then follow up with them, because there's often a document, a legal document that has to be crafted. But if you have those, I guess you call them leads or contacts.
Yeah, it's like the Busey
Very
Foundation.
helpful for us to pursue.
Yeah, like the Busey Foundation, who won the award for Outstanding Financial Contributor. They have a goal of 25 different things they're doing. Their pitches, their parks, the contributions that they're doing. So basically like that, they're a foundation, and so if we have connections, that can be of value.
Yeah, I'm going to put the wording onto Chris to come up with a better wording and share that with the board so that we can have that when we vote on this at the next time. Because I think it's more than just explore sources of supplemental funding. It's but since we have a lot to go through, and
so in addition to that, just piggybacking on what Chris said, does the Greenway at current offer events, such as walks or bike rides, where they can have a fee that could help support the Greenways itself? Because I use the Greenways a lot myself. You've always got people out walking, riding bicycles, and with their families. And because it's more of a safe haven, you don't have to worry about traffic and things of that nature. And everybody seems to be pretty respectable. I think it may be a good idea to just explore that possibility if that hasn't been explored.
yeah, I know that there are lots of different, you'll see signs on the Greenway that say, this is going to be used for the Lig and Run or something like that. So I don't know whether we charge, and I think that would be a great thing to add under presentation projects and updates, have a better sense of something, because it's fees, but it's not the fees that we look at on the sheet.
Well,
I don't know whether there is a fee.
I don't necessarily see it as a fee, but it's like the Jimmy Valvano bike ride, where people pledge donations to the individuals that participate that go to support the cause. And those are some of the things that could be done, I think, with the Greenway as it relates to running, walking, bicycle riding, maybe even picnicking, kayaking, whatever.
Yeah, I think that they're probably, you were talking about biophilic cities and models. I bet there are some models out there for how to, do we need, lots of cities have a conservancy. We have Dix Park Conservancy, primarily focused on Dix. Do we need a Raleigh Parks Conservancy? While we do have City of Oaks, it's primarily focused on the Joslyn property.
Well, that's shifted, and that's why I think it would be
helpful
really
to
helpful
have-
to bring in, is
have-
that
to have-
they're broadening the emphasis, which gives that opportunity for you all to see where they're broadening and reaching broader than just where they started with conservation in the Joslyn Garden. They're broadening to serve more, which gives those opportunities that we've not had before.
Right.
That was one of the items that I was going to recommend, is that, part of our advisory role is focusing on the natural conservation, and we need to prioritize that as part of our goals for the work plan. So that's missing here.
It is.
Saying how do we support the department in terms of the conservation efforts? How do we measure it? How do we drive towards those outcomes that the department's looking for, as well as the board's looking for?
And I think that's a great suggestion, and I'll challenge you to come up with some language. The interesting part of it is that even in the Parks Department, there's a dichotomy between certain areas where active use is encouraged and planned for, and other areas where active use is not planned, not intended. You got the Wilkerson Nature Preserve or Horseshoe Bend and things like that, and how we, are we watching all of those? But, and I don't know. Anyway, that's enough for me talking about that. But I think it's a really important overarching goal is to be mindful of what our role as one of the preservers of trees, going back to our earlier in our city. I bet most of those green spots on the heat map were parks, and how do we make sure that we keep trees in parks? So with that kind of feedback, I'll look forward to these additional input. Any other on overall goals?
This is kind of along the lines of promotion of the parks, but it's more a question, I guess, to Scott. Do we have, does the Parks Department have social media? No. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we do. We have a strong, we believe strong, communications team.
Okay.
That works on that for us and stays very active.
I'm only on Instagram, and I probably get at least one hit a day from Raleigh Parks.
They do a really great job. I work in marketing communications, so I can definitely see that as my purview. But there's a Facebook, a Twitter, and Instagram, and there's a variety of newsletters. So you could go collect content from there, and then oftentimes they come out every Friday.
Friday at 4:32.
I get them.
What we'll do, though, good point. We'll
And
make
then
sure that and I am not a social media person, but we have great people who are. We'll make sure you have all the handles and connections so that you're familiar with it if you're not already. We'll be happy to share that too.
Great.
Okay. So on overall goals, we're going to get some additional language on some of those things. We've got added the retain and recruit. Summary, that's all pretty boilerplate. Annual action.
Sorry, I had a question about summary, I think.
Okay.
Let me just make sure. Yeah, so under the liaison section, I know that since I joined, we've had these 6 groups that are always the liaisons, but I guess I was curious why we don't have more liaisons to some of the other committees that the city has.
How many committees are you on?
I'm just on this one. Oh, for the subcommittees?
You want some more committees to be on?
Well,
we've got subcommittees already. We could
Yeah.
use you on them.
Yeah, I'd love to join one, but even if we're not attending every single meeting, I'm wondering if we have contact with some of the other groups that would help us achieve the cultural goals. You know, we have a cultural goal of encouraging equity goals and reaching out to certain communities. And we have city committees that do that, and so I'm just wondering how much we interact
These are
with
the
them.
most direct park affiliated.
Yeah.
But I do think, and I think you'll see this as on this board, that staff does that role of bringing in, like tonight's example of bringing the planning staff when there's something where there's that intersection. So I think as a staff, they do a really good job. And that as volunteers, we might get, I think Marcia's point was we might get stretched too thin. It's hard to get to all of those meetings. But if you have a suggestion for an additional one, then, like Planning Commission is the board from.
Well, yeah, I mean, my suggestion was not so much putting more work on people's plates and attending more meetings, but creating open lines of communication so that we can reach out to them and just say, what are some things that we can do on the Greenways and Parks Advisory Board that would help you guys achieve your goals?
Well, I think specific on Greenway, we have the BPAC, the Bicycle and Pedestrian, and they're on both the Greenway Committee, and we have Christina as a member of BPAC. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it happens, but I think we should be open to that idea.
I was just going to ask kind of an opposite question, like, do we have specific projects that we work on with these liaison committees, or are we just there listening and they just come listen to us? Is it more like we're looking to make connections, or we have specific like goals and things that we're working on, and that's why we attend these meetings?
I think it's it's the sharing of information would be my.
And often they're the ones that we have, and the bike ped is a relatively new one compared to some others, is we saw that intersection of their work with the Greenway committee. So it was really, to Chris's point, shared interest in reaching those goals. Some of the others is, our assets that are part of our system, like historic cemeteries, historic resources, and on the Arts Commission.
I wanted to speak about the Raleigh Youth Council, because that was a group that I recommend that we get.
Right.
And I think the relationship has been wonderful, that there's been the interaction between them. So it's not just us listing them or going to their meetings, but we're actually interacting and doing some programming with them as well.
I have a question for participation. is there the possibility to explore hybrid interactions for these? So like the SWOT and everything has gone back to in person. And sometimes it can be hard to get other places.
You get your mic closer because it's
Closer
really
to the
hard
scratchy
hear you.
voice, yeah. Would there be the possibility that, like, so if folks come down here for a committee meeting, they could, like, listen in, you know? And participate hybrid to be more accessible and inclusive. So,
I think that
So just me, I want to make sure, so Lindsay, you're asking, is there like a virtual option where someone could listen in? Is that what you're asking?
yeah,
Okay.
like the SWAT committee, I'm interested. I love trees too. And Marcia's such a great ambassador. But I can't get down here during the workday. But like it's a Monday and I've since changed jobs since the last time we talked about the SWAT committee. I still can't get down here. But I could listen in while I'm working on Mondays. And I could just be tuned in like while I'm doing, you know, all my marketing things at my desk, and I'd be like tuned in. So is there that possibility that either folks could listen in so that they're tuned in and aware?
Lindsay, I just wanted to say that on Monday when we met, we were not able to connect with the students from Robin Moore's class. The city council has not allowed, there's a firewall apparently in the building, so you can't, he was unable to connect with the students that presented projects that we were, biophilic projects that we were going to learn about. So it is complicated.
But one change related to that actually is that that I talked with Stephen about today related to the Greenway Committee is there was a PowerPoint presented. And so I've asked that will be shared with all of you because some of the information was so micro that you need to see it in context in a map or whatever. And so I think that Scott's going to suggest that all PowerPoints from every committee go out to everyone, and I think that
that's
will
great.
improve
That's great.
that a
Then
lot.
we're looped in more if we would like to be. But what about the hybrid participation even for like, say, this meeting? Would that be something that we could explore?
So the direction we've been provided is that we cannot do public meetings in a hybrid model. You're either all online or you are all present. That's the direction that we've received from our city attorney's office on that. Now, what is possible, maybe, and again, this is not a tech person, is could we stream the meeting? So you can observe, but you can't, there's one way, right? It's like watching a TV show, which is what council does when they stream. The challenge with that is very limited where we can do that with the technology that we have. They have it set up for here, but we don't have it set up for all of the other conference rooms. And it becomes a question of how many meetings can sustain in this one space, competing with the other meetings. So that we'd have to look into that more to do that live stream model. We just don't have the technology other than this space to make that happen.
We're being live streamed right now, right?
I believe so, but there's a staff person here doing that.
Who does
We
that?
only have that consistently in this room.
For this room, yeah. Got it, okay. Thanks for humoring me there.
Okay, so any other questions on the summary? And thank you, Dr. Love, for adding the Raleigh Youth Council as.
They've made me proud.
They really have. We've all learned so much more about their activities because of that monthly report. So, annual action items, the Fletcher Awards again. I was going to say this later, but thank you to Lindsay and thank you to everyone for just the really awesome acknowledgements of the volunteers that happen there. Chair and vice chair, adopt work plan. One important change to dedications expected in 2023. That's not next calendar year. That's actually FY23, which begins July 1. So these are things that are likely to be in calendar year 2022.
How do we as committee members help support the dedications? Like, do we help organize or just get the word out?
We're just invited.
Oh, we're just
We ju-
invited?
yeah.
Okay. Just show up.
Getting the word out is always good.
Okay.
Yeah. It's, and when, do we know when the Nate McMillan is going to be?
More information is coming to you.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question on, and I don't know if it's here, but since we mentioned the Fred Fletcher Award, something that I have come across in the Parks Committee is that and I might have misunderstood, is that Fred Fletcher is the only thing that is that can be financially sponsored by the board. And I'm wondering, what about if other committees want to do something that wants advertising, wants any sort of financial, need that help? How do we decide which committees get that? Is there that opportunity?
I'm not sure that's germane to the work plan, or is it? I don't
know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking that that's maybe a conversation for them to present at a future time, but it's not really a work plan
Got it.
item.
Okay.
Just because I know we have a long.
Sure,
It's
no problem.
7:30, and we're working through this, but we have some other really important presentations too.
No problem.
I'm not trying to
No,
dismiss
not at all.
it. I just think it.
Mhm.
All right. One of the things, and this was added new to the work plan, was that we will begin to participate in the naming change process for Devereaux Meadows. And that is, as according to current city policy, it's not an appropriate name. It's becoming a default name, and it's time to get on that. And so we will have that in our, probably beginning at our next meeting.
Maybe not that soon, but it'll probably come when the Devereaux Meadow comes back for you to take a look at. We'll probably start the process at that point in time. During those of you that have attended, there in part of the survey, we've been getting people that were their interest for other names. So we've been collecting some of that from the public. So we'll use our naming process to consider another name for that park space.
I do think the sooner we do that, the better. I think we've talked about that before. It's review items of interest to the board where we send an update to council. I mean, it is sort of part of our standard review, is that, so, we review fees and charges. And then we budget review. Scott, can you help me understand?
So what we've done before is we presented what's in the capital improvement budget, what's in the operating budget, so you see what that looks like. There's a lot of work we're doing with the new penny for parks. Some big work that we're doing is we brought in a firm to do the whole assessment of our parks. And this is we know we have deferred maintenance, but we're bringing in a team to help guide us on what that capital, that penny, should be used for in future years. So we'll probably have a presentation on what that'll look like in that CIP. So you will see what's going to be, how it's going to be.
Okay, well, I think we definitely want to include that as a presentation then.
I had a question.
Sure.
Wouldn't our review items and our annual action items change based on how we're changing our goals? Because there would be some of the items that would be included in here that we have not considered based on Chris's suggestion and others, and Lynn's suggestion.
Well, and I would agree with that. And I think there also is probably a correlation between it almost ought to be right under it, these are our goals, and this is what we review in order to implement our goals.
Correct.
And so, I'll work with Jennifer to do some of that reorganizing, and again, welcome any input for items of review that help us set some of the metrics for it's no good to have a goal if you can't measure whether you're getting towards it or not. So I think that correlation is important. Thank you all. You all are just, this is great conversation. I love getting down to it. So that whole section will get beefed up. Special items for the year will be promoting the Parks Bond. That should be going on. And we're going to get a presentation in a few minutes that will be the presentation that Stephen Bentley shared with council that helped them reach the goal of $275 million, which just to give you a quick recap, back in 2019, when we as a Parks Board were setting priorities and doing the Post-it notes and for the massive list of projects that, I wish we could have a $500 million Parks Bond and really tackle some of those things. We set 3 levels. We had 150, we had 200, and we had 300. And so this is as close to the top number as I've seen. So it was good news, but we'll get to that. So presentations and project updates, it seems to me we're going to have the goals, the things we review, and then underneath that is going to be the presentations that support the review of the items tied to the goals. So and then I think those will be some big presentations, and then there'll be the smaller issues of pre-development assessments, which we've seen presented to us in the last couple of months, Dix Park updates, which is ongoing, public art master plan. There is a new city master plan for that. The racial equity training action plan, and I think that needs to be for staff and PRGB, right? I mean, you're going to present to us what you all are doing, or what we're doing. What you're doing, but and then I think,
which gets to the question earlier.
Okay.
Where we are with goals.
Yeah. Okay.
This is where I had a question for Scott. So Scott, is the Devereaux Meadow Park, the Dix Park, and the Public Art Master Plan, is that the top 3 priorities for the fiscal year for the department?
So the renaming request is an important one because we're hearing that, the community's hearing it, and council has asked that question. So that's why we added it to the work plan. Remember, the work plan is the council gives you authority to work on these things. So that was a big one. I think that would be a very big one for us moving forward. I would say the second one is working through the bond, preparing for a successful passing of that general obligation bond. That would be big because that guides so much what we're going to do for those next 5 years with that bond. The third one, I think, is the work that we're doing with our equity work. I think that is important to us. It's important to the city. So, and we've made those investments. So I think that would be the third largest one that we would want to bring forward for engagement.
Okay.
And then has Carol's identifying, I don't think we can definitely, we don't need to delete, don't need to include who requested member, we'll just delete that.
Just for you all.
Yeah.
Not how it's gonna be
Yeah.
when it goes.
Oh, yeah. But I think it is when there's a rezoning and it's close to a park, what are the impacts? I know that the city studies traffic, does a traffic study, and there is a process currently, so we'll get a presentation on how that happens. All right. And then items for committees, because this informs our regular work. Swat, do you have any comments, suggestions?
Well, these were things that we had been working on and added a few extra things. So I do think one of the important things that we'll be doing is continuing to deepen our understanding of biophilic principles and perhaps doing more outreach with other boards and commissions about this status. Thinking about in the future, you know, in 2 years, the city reports to the Biophilic Cities Network about the progress made and then sets new standards. So thinking ahead about that and supporting staff in whatever ways we can, I think that, you know, this is all what this is. Kind of
I just had some minor change
Yeah.
to the first bullet, and that is give insight into new ways to save, comma, protect, comma, and increase Raleigh's urban forest.
So that's a good edit.
Okay.
Get the A+.
All right. And then next is Parks Committee. And are there any comments, changes, suggestions?
No, I'm looking forward to a new fees and charges review period. This year was a little bit choppy because of everything, so it was a little bit confusing. So I'm looking forward to next year learning how the process has been and will be moving forward. And then just continuing to amplify our parks to residents and making sure that they know what amenities are available. We will be meeting on Saturday at Honeycutt Road Park with Kara in just mentioned to something you mentioned earlier. We're working with BPAC. So that is actually an event that we are placing with BPAC.
And Oaks and Spokes. the
And Oaks and
local
Spokes. And so
nonprofit.
that's what these Welcome to Raleigh events with the Parks Committee, we are trying to do exactly what you're talking about. It's connecting many different organizations so that it's not just a board initiative, it's a community initiative for sure. So I just wanted to mention that. But no, everything looks good to me.
And on the Greenway Committee, I think this goes directly to what Chris was talking about. There are a lot of different small nonprofits. There is the Triangle Area, I don't know what Mr.
Conservancy.
Well, there's the Triangle Land Conservancy. That's the bigger, that's a very big one. There is, but what's Mr. Fornoy's?
Council.
Triangle Greenways Council. There's another one that's another references greenways, and they exist as chartered nonprofits. They don't raise money. They do hold, some of them hold title to land and adjacent to our greenways. And so I think before we branch out into my ultimate goal of perhaps having some kind of conservancy for the whole parks or some kind of nonprofit funding for parks, that we first need to understand what the landscape is. And so that's the purpose of that goal. And then when I attended the transit or trail-oriented development, Visit Raleigh was there, and they were talking about we need better signs on our greenways, and you all know that's my broken record. So someday, when I'm long since off this board, it might happen. But anyway, and there were other municipalities that we ought to be coordinating. So, you know, I've in the last week heard several people talk about riding the Neuse River Greenway to Clayton because there are more restaurants there, and it's a beautiful ride. And so connecting with other communities that are all connecting green. I mean, we want our greenway system to be connected, so we need signage that matches that. So anyway, monitoring the Greenway master plan obviously is something that, we spend all the time doing it, and then continue to collaborate with BPAC. And then we will get the email, this would have come in my Greenway report, but that we got on this meeting this last month was on neighborhood connection projects. And so you'll be getting a copy of that spreadsheet. I mean, not spreadsheet, PowerPoint. So those are those items. All right, well, so I think we've got homework, and everybody can and is welcome, I think, to send it to Giovanni, and she will get it to Jennifer and I, and we'll work to wordsmith it and get staff's input and come up with a document that we can circulate before the next meeting, so that we can really get it finely tuned and have it really aligned. So I really appreciate this process.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Just in general, who do riparian channels fall under? So streams that aren't necessarily in a park or running alongside a greenway?
It depends.
Okay.
It is either us or stormwater.
Okay.
Engineering Services Stormwater Division.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Approval of the last meeting's minutes. Did everybody get them? There was some correction. It said that that the Greenway Committee would not be meeting in May, and it did meet in May. So I just wanted to correct the minutes on that. And anything else? So can I have a motion to approve the April minutes?
Second.
Second, great. And we've got a motion on the table. Discussion?
No.
Oh, you're just improving it. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, director's report.
Yes, so the report is in board docs for you. I'll just cover a few items. One, we briefly talked about the retreat. So at one time we were talking about a retreat in the June timeframe, June-July timeframe. So in conversation with Jennifer and Beverly, we felt like pushing it to September might be best, because at that time we may have a new director. So the timing would be good for the new director and the board to have the retreat at that point. So that's what we're looking at, is a kind of a late September period right now. That's where we have your information that we received, so we'll have kind of the 3 emphasis areas that we received from the survey, and we're looking at the opportunity to do the training at that time. So we're meeting actually to talk about that next month with Dr. Hamilton from the Department of Equity and Inclusion. So that's one piece. There's one item that's not in the director's report, but you may have seen today that Truist Bank made a $2 million gift to the Dorothea Dix Gibson Play Plaza swing area. I'm going to mess that up, but it's in there. So that's a nice item that didn't show up in the director's report. And the last piece that I'll bring up is the Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee meeting at this time may change, and we'll notify you about that change if we do make it. There was a opportunity to make a change to another date to accommodate, so we're trying to see if we can make that work, but if so, we'll let everyone know on that. So one item we thought we would do is, as Beverly mentioned, is have Stephen Bentley, who's done a wonderful job kind of stewarding this bond process for a while, to give you the presentation that he provided council. Some of you may not have had an opportunity to watch that, so we thought we would share what was presented to council, so that you could see all that was where we are. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Scott. I'm a Mac user, so I'm figuring this out. Well, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Park Board. I am Stephen Bentley, one of the Assistant Directors for the Parks Department. And this is the identical presentation. I did not change it. It's short, and I'll go through it a little bit slower. As Scott said, it's been a voyage of a couple of years. So if there are some historical questions for some of the new members, I'm happy to address them as well. Contextually, on May 10th, we provided a more robust presentation to the council and provided them 3 options. And they selected a $275 million frame. And what we did on Tuesday is brought back to them is how we would get to $275 million, because the price tag is $305 million. Ooh. So the agenda for today is to review what we shared with them, kind of the direction that we received. I'll review the bond list and the tax impacts, proposed tax impacts, the timeline for you all, and kind of walk you through what the timeline is for the next several months. And then ultimately the recommendation that we had for them, and they directed us to proceed. So some really good board comments about sponsorship and naming. One thing we could do is that I worked with members of the department, our attorney's office, the convention center, and our finance department, and we actually have a naming policy, and we have guidelines for sponsorship. So we can bring that to you. You talked about Bud Light, says in there, no tobacco, et cetera, et cetera. So it does place like a value system and provides guidance to staff. So what we heard from the council on May 10th was identify approximately $21 million in project opportunities to allow all the projects to proceed at $275 million. So remember, all the projects were $305. At the table, they did reduce Deborah Meadows down while I was here at the podium, so the price automatically went down a little bit. And they just used the term public-private partnership. But what we wanted to remind them, there's a whole set of tools we can use. So private philanthropy, someone just wants to give you money. Some people will want their name on it. Some people won't, so it won't be anonymous. Scott mentioned public-private partnerships and public-public partnerships, which would be if we build the Trailwood project, we are partnering with the DOT on. So we are getting money and we are doing it at the same time. Bless you. Naming, you're right. Naming really goes through a lot of hoops to jump through. One, who you are naming and why, and does that align with the community's values, and what are they getting in return? So there's not like a quid pro quo type scenario. Sponsorships, and Scott's right. Our department over the last few years in Ken's work, we have ventured into sponsorships incrementally. The other are grants. We're doing grants in kind. We periodically have companies that say, we'll give you some stone, and that's our contribution. It might be part of their corporate endeavor for corporate philanthropy. And then the last item was the council did open up the opportunity for us to rescope some projects and to phase some projects. So we reviewed all these tools with them on Tuesday. They also said adjust the scope and adjust the cost of Deborah Meadows. The price tag we had in the bond was $18 million. And that, in addition to our $18 million in the bond, we were going to get over $2 million from the stormwater department. So that was a $20 million project. And the council said, price tag's too much. We want you to adjust the scope and adjust the cost. We'll bring that back to you in June. So as well as our strategy to engage you and review our resolution with you on the naming policy. It is a very public policy that the board leads for renaming. So we'll bring some options back to you. But in this presentation, it doesn't tell you what we rescoped in the May 10th when it did. So we will bring that back to you. In short, they want to renovate the street, demo everything, remediate the site because there is some remediation needs. They want a renovated stream and a greenway, so a very passive-oriented park. But they want to leave the opportunity to add in the plazas that we're going to be on, if you remember the plan, on West Street and on P Street. That's where they're like, go find public dollars to do that. We'll pay for the core of cleaning it up and creating a safe and bike pedestrian friendly park. We heard from the council, focus on what you need, not what you want. So we did rescope a few projects and then develop an implementation plan that focuses on equity first. And because there is a lot of content to go through in these 2 meetings, we told the council, we'll bring that implementation plan back to you. So here's the updated list. What we did is we heard feedback. Let's look, the council said, hey, look at the bigger project. So we generally looked at projects that were over $10 million. They also, council said, look at projects that we can reduce in scope or phase, which I shared earlier, as well as are there projects that have lots of components where you could name a room or name a piece of a project and not have to name the entire project, or sponsor a piece of a project. So we went through, there's 23 projects, which are right here. And we were tasked with getting to $275 million. So I have a slide that just focuses on the ones that got us to $275 million. I'm going to go through all these projects for the benefit of the new board members.
Stephen, you may want to inject that the difference here from what you may have seen, the work that you all did that Stephen shared, there were scenarios 1, 2, and 3.
That's correct. Yes.
So
yep.
That's all one thing now, and it's all alphabetized. So there
Yes.
are no.
That's correct.
They're
So
not prioritized.
that's correct. So we,
For
when
time.
we went to the council on the May 10th, we provided 3 scenarios. The council chose the most robust scenario. So they said, we want to do them all, but we want to do them at this dollar amount. We have now moved away from the tiers because they've decided to do them all and alphabetize them. So I'm going to give I'll try to get through. So there's 23 projects, and before I came, I was looking through. Half these projects are outcomes of the board's work. Doesn't sound like they took a lot of your work, but they did, because remember, your bond had a ton of park maintenance, which they have funded through our penny. So your Greenway amenities, your emergency repair, your lighting, even some park amenities, those went into the penny. So the core of your projects, they have moved forward. I would say your major development projects from the last 2 years all made it into the bond. So, which is, I think, an acknowledgement of the board's work. So, Big Branch Connector is a project that will connect Crabtree Creek Greenway, basically up through the area that is the Midtown area to Six Forks. I don't have a map, so I'm going to talk a little bit in geography. Biltmore Hills Tennis Center is a project, Tennis Center Improvements is a project which we had insufficient funding for since probably 2015, 2016, which we are expanding the courts at Biltmore Hills Park. Devra Meadows, I talked about earlier. We rescoped that project and we removed $2 million from it. The phase 2 of for design of Dick's, we left off what that design would be because the council will choose what phase 2 will be.
Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, this is a silly question. Is the Conservancy not responsible for most of the costs for Dick's Park things?
To date, they have been a strong financial partner, and the city continues to match funds that they provide. So they committed to the first phase $20 million.
Okay.
And they paid $6 million to design the first phase, and we've paid zero from a capital standpoint. We are managing it. They have agreed to fund portions of it. That's correct.
Okay.
The second phase of design for Dick's Park, what that design is, has not been determined, but it is to keep momentum with the park. Sally's team for Dick's Park needs some upfit for operations. Currently, they are in a small cottage-like structure with a fenced-in area using mobile storage units to store some of their equipment. So this 1.6 will restore another cottage for them, but create a pole barn area to plug in some of our electrical based equipment. The second Dick's Park funding of $3 million is going to go towards we're currently launching a building study. So all 85 structures on the campus are going to be reviewed. and present it eventually to the city council to say, here are some opportunities for public-private partnership. This is $3 million for the council to pick a building and say, we will contribute $3 million to, whether it be, there is discussions about additional restrooms or some type of food concessions. And that would be $3 million to go to the private sector and say, you pick up the rest. The $35 million for the Play Plaza is to initiate construction and complete construction starting in August, and it would last 2 years. And that's the Gibson Play Plaza that Scott talked about today, which got a $2 million corporate donation. Aaronsbrook was a master plan that this board adopted, I believe in 2018, but had no construction funding. And the initial budget was $9 million. Since the master plan can be phased, we adjusted it by $2 million. Green Road park improvements, we did not adjust at all, but that would look at replacing the restrooms there and creating better ADA access in and around the restrooms, just off of the parking lot from the community center. John Chavis Memorial Park Phase 2 predominantly focuses on the Aquatic Center and the Heritage Plaza. The established budget that we had, yes.
Just had a quick question with John Chavis of Phase 2. What would be like the time frame for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is if you saw the last item that we have to bring to council is to talk about implementation. When they, the earliest we would get money is next July for projects. It will be the council's determination on how they roll out all these 23 projects. I mean, showing our cards, our department's going to say it needs to be the first one out of the gate, right? So, and I believe the council will take that recommendation as well. I don't have a time frame, but we have a general scope. It is an indoor, outdoor aquatics facility based off the master plan, but we'll work with the community on what are your priorities within that type of aquatic facility, from health and wellness and what type of outdoor and what type of indoor. So it'll take some time. And I'll pair that with, we have a lot of other projects in and around there. So we're going to, as a department, really assess how we do public engagement on all the projects in and around Chavis and South Park to make sure it's clear, it's intentional, that there's not planning fatigue. But this board will definitely be a key partner in working with the community on those projects. Yes.
Hey, and just backtracking a few to Dick's Park Play Plaza.
Yes.
In December, was that the same place, the same park that received $12 million from
Yes,
council
that is correct.
and $10 million from the Gibsons? So is that in addition to the 35? So now that
Yes.
park has an additional $22 million. That's now a $57 million project.
The $10 million is not. That is private funds.
I'm not saying, I understand that's private funds, but I'm saying that's all going to that park. That
is
park
correct.
is now, so now it's 57. Okay.
Yep. Yes.
One more
Yes.
question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. This is a lot of material, and there's a lot of new board members, and we get to do it in person, which is good. Right? So,
Just with John Chavis again. So when the Phase 2 come for the Aquatic Center, I'm pretty sure it's going to seek and draw more attention
yes.
to that park. Has it been a thought of an expansion for like parking for John Chavis? Because I'm
Yes.
pretty sure it's going to be
Yes.
needed. So
Absolutely.
okay.
Yep.
A deck.
Okay. So what we identify with Chavis, there's $2 million in opportunities we feel like. So if you think about it, that'll have multiple components. We can look at corporate sponsorships or private foundations that may want to contribute to that project. Kyle Drive Master Plan and implementation. This is a part, it is a park that is undeveloped. If you are going up Capitol Boulevard and you take the 401 split, it is in that area. It is an area that really needs a park. So that will master plan the park. It's a real, it's a park that has a lot of wetlands, so we see it as being a really passive oriented park. Okay. Let's see. Lake Lynn Trail. So we bid half. The funds that we had in the 2014 bond only were able to pave half of the Lake Lynn loop. So we are going to pave the second half of the loop. The council has put in funds for the redevelopment of Lake Wheeler Road, and that's at $21 million. And then the Leonard property, which is really right below Falls Lake Dam, so where you park at the very north end of the Neuse River Trail, that's the Leonard property. And there has been a lot of interest there for water access for years, and it's been an area of a lot of interest in that community to have has parking issues there as well. Marsh Creek Greenway feasibility study. So if you think about our greenways, you have the Neuse River, and then there's a big blank of north and south greenways. This is an area that would basically parallel Capitol Boulevard, but more just east of Capitol Boulevard. We own Marsh Creek Park, Hill Street Park, and a lot of greenway easements up along the Marsh Creek corridor. And this
way east of Capitol Boulevard, though.
Not very far.
Yeah,
No.
I guess outside the Beltline there.
Yeah, we're talking a corridor all the way from Triangle Town Center down to inside the Beltline. We have quite a few. It'll be on road and traditional greenway, but we have quite a few greenway easements that we acquired from like the 80s and 90s development. This will look at how do we get up through that corridor and connect a lot of people who are looking for, we'll say, bike and pedestrian opportunities and not have to go out to Capitol Boulevard. So, Method Road Community Center. That's a historic center, so you can see we were taking like $2 million clips. We wanted to make sure that it's a historic center, that the opportunity for us to do a lot of, we'll say, sponsorships we thought would probably go down. We wanted to keep the historic integrity of the place. So that has $1 million in opportunities that we identified. Mine Creek Greenway improvements is relocating portions of the Mine Creek Greenway and improving some of our bridges and repaving old portions of the Greenway. And then the neighborhood and community connections, that is what Beverly talked about. It's a program where we're connecting parks and greenways to subdivisions or to schools, or to different neighborhoods. We adjusted that by $1.7 million because we feel like that we can partner with some of the new developments that are coming in to say, hey, if you're going to build here, we'll put up half the money and you match our funds. Mm-hmm. Sertoma Arts Center is a complete renovation and small addition to the neighborhoods or art center. And then the South Park Heritage Walk and Top Green Center has been a priority of the South Park neighborhood and our council. We didn't adjust that project. One that we did rescope was Strickland Road and Leesville Park improvements. Both of them have temporary restrooms. So we're going to put in permanent restrooms, and we were planning on doing some fitness equipment and play equipment. So when we heard need versus want, we really need to have permanent restrooms there. We'll go back and find grants possibly for play equipment. And then Tarboro Road Community Center, we feel like similar to Chavis and some of the bigger projects, we feel like we can really, really dig in deep and find some corporate opportunities or private foundations to bring to the table. That is literally a tear down and rebuild of the Tarboro Center, so which we're thrilled about. And then Walnut Creek Greenway improvements is about from the South Saunders area beyond State Street on the Walnut Creek Greenway. It is one of our oldest sections. It floods, and if you've ridden it and jogged it, it looks like one of our oldest sections. So it's one of those things, going back, repositioning things, putting in more resilient boardwalks. So over to your right are all the different dollar amounts that we are identifying and propose to the council to say, we'll either rescope or adjust, but for all of them, we'll use those tools I shared with you earlier from grants, public-private partnerships, and sponsors to hopefully go back to a full budget. The next slide really was the summary. This is the one I reviewed with council, but I wanted to give you all the kind of the broader perspective. What does that mean for residents of Raleigh? So a penny in Raleigh A penny on the tax base in Raleigh generates about $7.8 million annually. That's based off of the median value of a city home is 37.30 cents. The bond assumption is roughly $275 million just for the projects, and that means that annually, when all these projects are built, there will be an $11 million increase to the city's annual operating budget. That totals a 4 penny increase, and on a home that is $256,000, that means their taxes would go up about $103 a year. So specifically for the next steps, we'll bring back to the council on June 7th. That will be their first official vote. By law, their first official vote is really intentional. What is the purpose of the bond legally? And what is the bond amount? Getting back to what we heard from this group, Scott and other board members, we asked the council, hey, we've heard a lot about naming. Can we just initiate that process? And they said, yes, do it. And we added it to your work plan this evening. We'll bring back to you in June what that process, we've had a couple renaming processes, but it's been virtual. So what we'll do is we'll just lay out the resolution and what that means, the time frame for it. We'll also have our team who's been doing the public engagement share what they've heard in the survey. And how we'll engage the community further, and then bring back to you some options for naming.
Well, can I ask,
yeah.
as part of that process, that we not prolong it so that we learn about the process and then we learn about the names, consolidate it so we get as much of the information in the next meeting so that we can then have then we have to have public hearing, and then we takes a vote, and so
it's a 3-month process.
Minimum.
Yeah.
And if you add in your traditional, the board is taking August off.
Right.
Correct.
Which pushes that final decision, I think, the 3rd month into September.
And that's why I want the naming options to come at the same time as the process and the information, so that we can have all of that on the table so that we can keep that process moving quickly.
Time frames noted. We also want to be intentional not to preclude those people who submitted
Right.
a
Oh,
name
no,
so that it just
but
comes
we
here.
need to start hearing. They're out there, so let's start gathering that.
And then we need to bring back the implementation plan that I shared, focused with equity at the forefront. So this is what a bond calendar looks like for the city council. I shared the June 7th purpose of the referendum and dollar amount. These are all like the statutory requirements, so it might sound like a little bit of legalese, but they introduced the bond orders on June 21st. They allow for the filing of sworn statement of debt and statement of estimated interest, and then they announce the public hearing on the 21st. They hold a public hearing on July 5th, and they will adopt the purpose and the amount of the bond and call for the referendum. In between there, they will be working with a local government commission in Wake County. So there are a whole bunch of steps that are kind of out of the public eye, but these are the required 3 steps for the city council over the next 2 months, and then the referendum is on the 8th. This is what we recommended to the council, which we were authorized to proceed. And that was the full presentation. Are there questions that I can answer for the board?
Questions?
Okay, well, thank you.
Great, thank you, Stephen. It's a very exciting opportunity. And one of the things I don't recall in our work plan, but is a summary of everything that I think would be, and you could really, we don't have to have everything be presented as a presentation, but a printed summary of where we are on all the 2014 bond projects.
Oh yeah, we can do that.
I think that would be helpful as we go forward.
Sure, absolutely.
Just one more quick question. With Method Road, I know you spoke about was it Topper Road? It might have been Topper Road.
Yeah.
Well, it will be receiving a full renovation. Will Metro Road be doing the same thing? I know
Yeah.
it's a historical landmark. So it's a lot of ins and outs with it.
It's a pretty robust budget, and actually we've done some advanced planning for Method, knowing that it was a priority for this board and the council. So we've audited, we'll say from an infrastructure perspective, we'll do a really classy inside restoration. Since it's historical, the exterior will look the same, but we'll renovate it, but the exterior of the building is going to look the same. It'll just look cleaner and more well kept. Inside, we'll work with the community on how can we repurpose the spaces to be more functional to what the community's priorities are.
We have to honor the old school.
Yeah,
That's right.
Historic, right.
Yep.
Mr. Barrow Kelly.
Thank you.
All good. Thank you. Thank you so much on that. And that was part of the director's report. And
Director's report's done.
all right.
I have one question. What's the status of air conditioning in the community centers?
So the status is this. We will have air conditioning this summer again, but not all of the full systems, the permanent systems will be in. Supply chain caught us with some of the parts. So we're going to provide the temporary like we did last year. So that will not change. The work was done, the planning was done, the engineering was done. We just ran into challenges with actually getting the equipment in time to have it installed.
I'll get it for you.
So that's where we are. It's purely a supply chain challenge, but we have already put in place the systems that we had last year, so they will be air conditioning again this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Committee reports. Parks?
We had our meeting the first week of this month, and we were talking about our park fee schedule, our updates. We did have some comments, some concerns. Somebody from Lake Wheeler came and noted that while they are okay with an increase, their concerns were that during the pandemic, when they had less access to the lake, they were still paying the same amount. So they feel like the 25% increase is a little bit too high for them, since they're mainly of the, I want to say it was like a $6,000, the revenue that they made. I don't know if that's the number, no, it's correct. It's 5,000 or 6,000 that they're responsible for a large portion of that, and that it felt like a tax on them specifically. So I thought that was a valid concern. I definitely loved hearing that from them. We had, and now that was my biggest takeaway. I loved hearing from the community because I had no idea. Those are those specific concerns that I was like, wow, I don't ever go to Lake Wheeler. So I definitely love to hear from that community that feels, and I want to hear their concerns before making those big decisions on rate increases. So it was a great meeting. We continue our Welcome to Raleigh series. Like I said, we will have our event on Saturday at Honeycutt Road Park. We will be partnering with the city. Forest Ridge is going to come out, and they're going to help us along with Oaks and Spokes and BPAC, and we're going to be focusing on bicycle maintenance. They're going to teach us how to inflate a tire, fix that. I definitely need some help there. So it's going to be a really fun event. There's opportunities for people to go onto the Greenway. There'll be some rides. There'll be some bike share to let residents know what that system, introduce it to them for those of us that don't know. There's also a park at the site for families if they don't want to go on the ride and they just want to focus on learning about bicycle maintenance. But it's been really exciting. And then in June, we will be going to Chavis for Juneteenth and celebrating that. So that's really, really exciting to be a part of. And we'll learn more about that in our June meeting of the first week. So that, unless I've forgotten anything, I think that was our update.
Your T-shirt, you did that.
Oh, my T-shirt. Yes. Yay. Bike month. Yay.
I thought you were going to show the one about
Trash.
trash.
Yeah, the
I
litter.
thought that was the one you were going to show.
Oh, you mean for the Great Raleigh cleanup? That one?
No,
the gentleman that spoke at Parks
gentleman
Committee.
that came to talk about his trash.
Oh, that is what I was forgetting. Oh, no, he didn't give me a shirt. I wish I got a shirt. There's a gentleman who came and spoke, and he was talking about, that's right, about Shelley Lake and seeing if we can increase the trash pickup times, because there's just a lot of people coming and there's a lot of trash. And the name of his organization was
Raleigh.
Litter Bugs Us. Litter Bugs Us. And I was like, I love that name. The Great Raleigh Cleanup is something that we are partnering with. It's a different organization. But Litter Bugs Us, he just goes and he wears that shirt and he cleans up Shelley Lake. So that's how he brought that concern to the Parks Board. Thank you for that reminder, Marcia.
Fred Fletcher, thank you. We've said it before, but we'll thank you again. And Mary Owens, too. She just...
Mary was outstanding. So thank you again for all your contributions and collaboration and showing up and bringing the shine. Like, was it a week and a half ago, I guess? So it was really awesome, and I hope to get to be a part of that with you all again next year. It was so much fun. It was really inspiring. So I think I'm going to go home and have some more tea now, but it was really great to be with you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Greenways Committee, as we talked about, the conversation at this month's meeting was actually, I won't say provoked, initiated by something I saw on the email thing, Raleigh Today. And I get that in my inbox every day and read it some days. And there was an article about a lake that was going to be over near Costco along the Greenway. I was like, wow, I hadn't heard about that, and I'm on the Parks Board. Well, it is in the long-term Midtown plan, and it will be something, obviously it's not funded in this bond, but it is part of a longer-term planning. But there is also a little stub at the end of Industrial Drive, which is the back entrance to Costco, goes down, and there's a way to connect to the Greenway. And that, so I'd ask Stephen, well, what was the status of that? And so he said, oh, well, you all need to know about all of the different little stub connectors that connect the Greenways to sometimes neighborhoods and other commercial places. To be honest, since we don't have any development at that particular location, I still have questions about the validity of paving for when a developer is going to be developing high rises right there. But I'm still asking those questions. But that was what we got a report on, and we will send that PowerPoint out to everybody so that you could zoom in on the map and get your context for where those locations are. And other than that, that was the focus of that committee meeting.
So the Sustainability, Wildlife, and Urban Trees Committee met, and we're lucky to have Dr. Robin Moore, who's a professor at NC State in landscape. He teaches a class once a year about biophilic design, and his students did an independent research project, and they made 3-minute videos showing, featuring different areas and how they could be improved with biophilic elements. And Robin visited the committee, showed 4 students' projects. One was West Street, just enlivened by having rooftop gardens and architectural elements that help hide the parking decks and vines growing, green things growing, how it changed, and even having a small pocket park over on an empty lot. Anyway, so then we did one for the Rose Garden and a couple of things with trees and greenways. So it was very informative. People learned a little bit more about biophilic standards. And we are, as Scott said earlier, thinking of changing our meeting date to a Wednesday. So we'll see if that can all be worked out. So we have space on the committee If any of you new people have not decided what committee you want to serve on.
Well, there's
I'd
space on
say-
Greenways too.
I don't know what it takes to get people to come to committee meetings, but just know you're welcome.
Is the possible change to Wednesday also going to possibly move the meeting time back?
We don't know that yet.
Yeah, and we are going to move Greenways to 5 o'clock.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I did have, just in addition to the sweat, remember, I thought, especially since we're talking about public-private partnerships, as we discussed these amazing ideas that came from students, the concern of budget, as it always comes up, because that is a concern. And we discussed the possibility of partnering with our current MSDs, so our municipal service districts of Downtown Raleigh Alliance and Hillsborough Street, and how we can use that partnership to help create opportunities, since we as a city are already funding and giving those, in addition to taxes, we are also giving, like DRA, hundreds of thousands of dollars like they received last year. So how can we help make that connection to say this is what we would like to see happen as part of this public-private partnership? And I thought that was a really constructive portion of our conversation. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. That's the Sustainability Life and Urban Trees Committee meeting.
Great. All right. Deborah Meadow Park. I don't think, is there any update on that? But we'll come up with a new name soon. Maybe we'll start calling it DMP, just for committee reports, liaison representatives, Arts Commission. Carol had to leave. BPAC.
I have the Arts Commission report.
Oh, fabulous.
So we're excited the city of Raleigh is excited to host the Kennedy Center's Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disability.
Wow.
Raleigh's actually been involved with this, and the city continues to be seen as a national leader in accessibility in the arts, and is proud to host the event in 2022. It'll be August 1st through 5th at the Raleigh Convention Center. So excited about that, and some opportunities, trying to make sure that our local arts community has opportunity to go. And I think the Arts Commission is considering, is there a way they can put together a funding program for technical assistance to continue growing awareness of disability opportunity in the arts. Public art plan, which you saw, drafts are starting to come out, and they'll be shared for the community engagement. And the last is the Wake BRT Newbern, the Bus Rapid Transit Newbern Corridor artist conceptual designs are now out. This is where the artist was actually integrated in the whole design of the Bus Rapid Transit Corridor, and how they're applying artistic transitions into that, whether it's at the stations or stops. So an artist was hired all through the process, and they worked really aggressively with the community, getting their input, especially with the history of that Newbern corridor. So that's the report from the Arts Commission.
You said those designs are available now to view?
They are. It's publicinput.com.
Okay.
/ BRT Bus Rapid Transit Public Art. So BRT Public Art.
Right. Cool.
Repeat, please.
Yes. It is publicinput.com / BRT Public Art, one word. And that is the report.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to hear that. BPAC?
So I thought we were meeting after our SWAT committee meeting, but there was a retreat that started at 4 that day, and so I missed the meeting, and I apologize. I will make up for it next month. Thank you.
And historic cemeteries? Sally?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Sally Thigpen. I'm one of the assistant directors. Not too much to report on historic cemeteries other than they will be meeting next month. Nope, that's not true. Next week on Thursday at the Tucker House at 5:30. We are working on their annual report, and we'll be electing officers. So that's the main update for historic cemeteries. I did want to take this opportunity to share a bit of personal news with this board. I've accepted a position with the city of Wilmington and will be leaving the city of Raleigh next month. I'm so sad to leave, but have a wonderful opportunity there with lots of family, aunts and uncles and grandma and grandpa. So I've got 2 little kids and looking forward to raising a couple of beach bums down east. So I'll still be in the profession, working in Parks and Recreation. It's been an absolute honor working with all of you and advancing the amazing initiatives of this department. I will also leave you saying that you are working with some of the best in the profession, and it is incredible what Raleigh has done and will do, and you play such an important role in that. I'd also like to point out Ivan Dickey, who's in the audience. Ivan's been in the parks maintenance profession for over 30 years and is an exceptional leader in our department, and I'm really excited for him to be serving in an interim role to help bridge the gap to make sure that our parks, trails, cemeteries, and everything in our whole system continues to look great and is safe and beautiful and ready for the citizens and visitors of Raleigh to use. So thank you so much for the opportunity to serve with you.
Good luck, Sally.
Oh,
Thank you
congratulations.
for all you've done
Thank
for
you.
us.
Congratulations, but that is, you are truly, you will be missed. But, wow. No heads up on that. Dick's Leadership Committee, I don't know whether Stephen has anything there.
They meet on Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
At Chapel at Dick's Park at 9 a.m.
Okay. I'm guessing that Jennifer will not be able to be there because she probably will still be contagious. Historic Resources and Museum Advisory Board.
I don't have anything on that one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Chair reports. Did want to share that I attended this morning at Pullen Art Center. I went over to learn about how to use the bike share. I've known how to ride a bike, but not how to use the bike share. And so I encourage everyone to go to your app store and download Cardinal Bike Share app. And you can do a pass. If those of us of a certain age can get the access pass, which is extremely reasonable. And so I downloaded that. And but you can just having the app on your phone will make it so much easier to use a what was Citrix bikes and are now Cardinal bikes. And it was interesting to talk to the staff members that were there, talking about the huge increase in usage over these last couple of years and how the usage changed from being downtown Fayetteville Street centric to broader parts of the community. And one of the newest stations is at Gateway Plaza, which is just one long block from the Crabtree Creek Greenway. So if you go over to Union Station and get your coffee and croissant, or I think there's a bottle shop, and then go and ride on the Greenway. And and there's a really cool marsh area with lots of turtles for those of you with kids. So anyway, I learned about that today, and that's all I have to report. Anything else? We can adjourn this meeting.
Well,
May I have a
unless
motion?
there are comments
Yeah,
from committee
comments
members.
from board members?
Oh, just a reminder that Saturday, June the 4th, from 11 to 1 p.m., me and Adam will be hosting the Family Field Day from 11 to 1 p.m. So if you're not doing anything on that day, please feel free to bring your family and friends out to enjoy the amenities. Yes, sir. Sanford Road Park.
Where is it? One more time. I'm so sorry.
Sanford Road Park.
Sanford Road. Thank you.
If you'll send us an email, then it'll pop up and be connected to our calendars easier.
Yep. I'll put the flyer in an email and send it out to everybody so everybody can have it.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Anybody else have anything else to report? Well, everybody be safe, stay well, and I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I know how to do that part real well.
Thank you.
Thanks.